Hey guys, welcome to the Bad Blood Football Podcast. Today we're going to be doing a wide receiver and tight end episode, and it's going to be about all the trades that have been happening in recent days. So we're going to cover every big wide receiver and tight end trade that's happened then. So, we're just going to get right into it. We'll start out with DeAndre Hopkins going to the Cardinals. So, Dan, why don't you start us off?
This trade is very strange to me. I don't know why the Texans would get rid of their star receiver, who has been so great for them throughout the years that he's been in the NFL. So for me, this trade is just crazy on their part. It's basically like what the Raiders have been doing by fucking up and getting rid of Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, these great players who could really help their team out, and now they're trading them away to the Cardinals. I mean, great addition to the Cardinals. He'll be there with good old Larry Fitzgerald, which is fucking awesome. So I'm hyped to see how they do, especially they're running with a young QB over there in Arizona. So it'll be interesting to see the dynamic that grows over time.
Yeah, I mean, because Kyler Murray, I mean, he didn't really show that much ability, in my opinion. I mean, they only went 5-10 with a tie, and it's just strange that the Cardinals decided to, or I guess really the Texans, like Dan was saying, to allow Hopkins to leave. Then they replaced him with another guy that we're going to talk about later in Randall Cobb. I don't understand that whatsoever. But right now the Cardinals are looking kind of strong. I mean, they have arguably the best offensive player in DeAndre Hopkins and the best defensive player in Chandler Jones. I mean, even though Hopkins had this mid-tier season last season, I mean, I don't really know what it exactly, was a product of. But we're going to see. I mean, hopefully they improve because, as Dan was saying, he's there with Larry Fitzgerald. So, I mean, if he's got anything to learn, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald will be the guy, the mentor, obviously, but he's already probably the best receiver in the game right now. So, I don't know. I mean, the Cardinals are definitely got the better end of this deal, regardless of what they gave the Texans. I mean, it's just, it does not make sense. Maybe he just wanted to change in scenery. I don't really know. But it is a big deal, in my opinion. It was a great move for the Cardinals, regardless.
See, this seems like I respect Hopkins less for taking this move because it's like a huge downgrade for him in terms of quarterback play. And even if the Cardinals improve a lot from their pretty bad season last season, they're just not going to do as well. And so this says to me that he cares more about, like money and personal politics than actually winning Super Bowls, which they had the potential to do on the Texans. So he moved from like a big up and coming quarterback to, Kyler, average quarterback at best.
Well, we don't really know though because he's not a proven entity. He's only been in the league for 1 year. He had a mediocre offense. I mean, we already know what the Texans can bring offensively, and obviously it was not enough to bring to the Super Bowl. So maybe he's trying something new to get out, and maybe he can. Or he's a person you build a team around. And now they also had Kyler Murray, who they're trying to build a team around as well. So now they have two guys that'll fit very well with each other. I think it's just going to be beneficial all around. I mean, like you were saying, you respect him less. I respect him more. I mean, because he wants to help a team win. I mean, I guess he's been with the Texans for 5 or 6 years, and they haven't gotten it done, and he knows that, and he wants to win like everybody else. I don't think it's truly about the money. Maybe it is, but I just think he wants to win, and Kyler Murray is an unknown entity at this point in time. Maybe he'll get worse, maybe he'll get better. We don't know, but all I know is that he was a first-round pick, and they saw something in him, so I guess we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I just think I don't see why the Texans would do this. I don't see why Hopkins would do this, but I do see why the Cardinals would do this because it's really good for them. But yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed in this. It definitely makes the Texans worse. Cobb, as we're going to talk about later, is no substitute for this guy. So, kind of sad to see this. Cardinals, don't expect big things from them. Be another middle of the pack or bottom end team. Middle of the pack at best. So, all right. So next up, we're just going to talk about that Cobb move to the Texans. So he was just 32nd in the league in receiving yards. He had 828 yards on 55 targets, but he had a pretty solid average and he looked pretty good in some key moments. So, I think this is a good move with, he's moving to an up-and-coming QB. It makes a lot of sense for both parties involved, but I would have really liked to see it with Hopkins, as I was saying before. I would have loved to see this move, but also keeping Hopkins, because he is just not as good as Hopkins is. even though Hopkins didn't have the best season last year.
So I mean, so Cobb was this supporting wide receiver to Amari Cooper last. So that was his role. That's going to be his role. But the problem is the Texans don't have a star wide receiver anymore, like you were saying. I mean, there was a horrible move for the Texans. And he is not even remotely as good and or as much of a playmaker as Hopkins is. It doesn't make any sense. It was a huge downgrade. He's a mediocre player at best. I mean, even when he was with Green Bay, I mean, he was still mid-tier. So it's like, why did they do this? It's almost like they're like bringing him in to be a supporting member to a drafted wide receiver, but I don't really know. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Packers knew what they were doing when they first released him. I think he was pretty fucking great on the Packers, and then they released him in perfect timing because ever since then, I just think his performance has downgraded. Like you said, he's a supporting role. He was a supporting role at Dallas, and now he's moving over to the Texans, and I don't see him helping this Texans team, especially since they got rid of Hopkins. And if they think that with Cobb on their wide receiving core is going to get them back into a position that they just had this past year in the playoffs, they got nothing coming because just his performance isn't great. He's an older receiver now. He's always injured, so I just don't see this Texans team benefiting from this pickup at all. That's my side of the take on that.
Yeah, I would say that if anything, they're worse because they, if you look at both moves in one, so, they lose Hopkins, they get Cobb in, so they get worse. But, I would expect basically what we saw last season from them. I think they'll be a playoff team. I don't think it's, they're 100 times worse or anything, but, just a bit disappointing. So we got Stephon Diggs going to the Bills. The Bills were 10-6 last season. So, what do you think about that, Rob? You could take it away.
So, to be honest, I think it's surprising that he decided to leave the Vikings because the Vikings are, they're a pretty solid team year after year after year. I mean, moving to the Bills, you're getting probably a parallel move in I guess, playability, but the Bills lucked out with this acquisition. Diggs is a phenomenal route runner. He's going to be a huge target for Josh Allen, making them a serious contender in the AFC. Honestly, they're probably going to win that division unless the Dolphins can pull something out because New England's definitely not doing it this year, getting rid of literally everyone. They're cleaning house. So I just think that this will make them that notch above the Dolphins, and especially in the AFC in general. I see them going probably 11-5, 12-4 next year. The only problem with him is that he was having issues holding on to the ball last season. I think he had 4 fumbles and 3 of them were lost. So it was odd, but he had a career season last year in yards with he only had half of the receptions he had the year previous. So he's a known entity. It was a good move. I think they're gonna do big things this year, and I'm kind of scared being a New England fan. But I don't know, man. It's
And you should be. You should.
Yeah,
be
I know.
Because they're gonna shit on the Patriots this year. My take is, he flat out said, I want to get out of here, and that, just like Robert just said, he wasn't getting his targets anymore, and he knew that, and he also was kind of dueling it out between him and Adam Thielen in the Vikings, kind of seeing who was the actual wide receiver number 1. And I think he just got tired of that. He wants more targets. He wants to be able to produce for the team. And I think with the addition of him going to the Bills and on their receiving core, he's going to be able to do that, especially with a dominant young QB over there. I think they're definitely, I agree with Rob, they're definitely going to be pushing for the playoffs, if not take their whole division upcoming year.
Yeah, so last season, the Bills were 26th in terms of receiving yards, but they were 8th in terms of rushing. And I think this helps them shore that up a lot because Diggs had 1,100 receiving yards last season, but with that said, he only got like 65 catches, so he had 17.9 yards per reception, which is second in the league for any wide receiver who caught over 60 passes. So I really think this helps balance their team out a lot, which is a good move for them because you don't want to be really good rushing team with a poor passing attack. I think Allen is a serviceable quarterback, and this is going to help him do more for next season in addition to their already pretty good rushing attack. So I like this move a lot. Definitely better team than the Patriots now, unfortunately. Yeah, it's just, obviously Patriots eventually had to suck, right?
No, yep. It was inevitable, right?
So now let's move on to Nelson Aguilar going to the Raiders. The Raiders won 7-9 last season. Dan, you could start it off.
Okay, well, we've talked about the Raiders previously and how they continually just kind of shoot themselves in the foot. I honestly don't like this pickup either. I mean, Nelson Aguilar, as well as all of the Philadelphia Eagles receivers, struggle with even catching the ball. So, picking up Nelson Aguilar is going to make no difference for the Raiders and their offense. They still have so many other things to work on right now. So the addition of Nelson Aguilar is just another receiver in the mix for them. I don't expect any big play out of him on his part. So, I mean, that's just my take on the pickup. I don't think it's very notable.
No, I guess we added him to this list because he was a former first round. Literally, like Dan said, he just can't catch passes. He was drugged through the mud in Philly with not being able to catch the ball. He only played 11 games last year. I mean, it's odd because there are some experts that are saying that he's going to have a breakout season. However, the uncertainty at quarterback, you just brought in Mariota. I mean, is he a backup? Most likely. Derek Carr's better. But there's a general lack of continuity between Gruden and Carr, and I just don't know that is going to be a productive environment for someone who's struggling to catch the ball, is struggling to get yards and touchdowns, who is definitely going to be the number one in Las Vegas. But I just don't know that he's going to be the guy for them. I mean, we already said they let go of Amari Cooper, who is probably one of the better receivers in the game. And, Nelson Aguilar is going to a team that had a tight end who was a leading receiver, which is he's not even a good tight end. So I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting pickup, but we'll see what happens.
So I just think this is another small step. It's it's definitely a good thing, I guess, but it's just a small step on the world's longest rebuilding period for the
Literally
Raiders.
the longest, yeah.
So I don't, if I'm being honest, I don't think this team's ever going to be good. Not
at least
in
with
any
Gruden at coach.
Yeah, with Gruden, obviously, 10 years down the road, when everything's different, they could be good. But I don't think in the next 5 years this team is going to be a real contender for the Super Bowl or even championship games. They're not really going to be that team, in my opinion. So, it's fine, but they're going to need a lot more than this in this offseason if they want to be a real contender. So let's move on to a much better team. For men of culture here, we'll talk about the Saints picking up Emmanuel Sanders. So the Saints were 13-3 last season, and I really, really like this move for Emmanuel Sanders. From his point of view, I like doing this because he's a pretty old, experienced wide receiver, and he's going to get to play with one of the best cute quarterbacks in the league, and a super experienced guy. But with that said, from the Saints side, you have to be a little bit worried that Sanders has only played a full 16-game season 4 times out of his 11 seasons in the league, and he hasn't been able to do that for 4 or 5 years now. So since he played with Peyton Manning, he hasn't been in the top echelon of wide receivers. He hasn't hit that point again, although it has largely been because of injury. So it's a question for me. He gets to play with somebody almost as good as the all-time great Peyton Manning in Drew Brees. So it's an improvement to an already excellent roster. They went 13-3 last season, like I said, and I think this is a good move, but it's such a good team. This is just the standard for them. So I don't think it makes them a Super Bowl winner or anything, but this is a very good move in my opinion.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think that they are a major contender because now you brought in someone that can take off a little bit of heat from Michael Thomas, who was the leading, and Drew Brees, like you said, an older guy and a very experienced guy. They're going to get along very well. Even though Sanders doesn't, play 16 games I think the amount of time that he will play this upcoming is going to be enough to be have the ability to spread that all around a lot, and it's going to just be they're going to be an absolute dominant. It's going to be horrifying, and yeah, I think he'll be a supporting cast member to Michael Thomas. I think that's probably why they brought him in, being a little bit of a mentor. But I just think that this pickup was really good on both sides of the ball. I mean, not both sides of the ball, but in both parties. I think Sanders made out really well. And I think the Saints are getting this quality, supportive wide receiver that's just going to keep improving their team more and more and more like they always have been.
Yeah, so I would agree to that. I think this pickup is a phenomenal advantage towards the Saints. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders started his career out in the NFL with the Pittsburgh Steelers, then got traded to the Denver Broncos where he played there for several years, and then he just had I think he had a pretty phenomenal year with the 49ers. And it was funny because Emmanuel Sanders made his decision from free agency to sign with the Saints due to his grandmother. His grandmother prefers this team and persuaded him to sign because she wants him to play with Drew Brees and play under Sean Payton. So the New Orleans Saints persuaded him to sign with them for $16 million over 2 seasons. I think this is a great pickup. I think they'll do phenomenal. He'll produce for them for sure. If I could, I would have him back on the Steelers, but now that he's on the Saints, I think their offense is going to be firing even hotter than they were last year.
One last thing I wanted to mention is that, the Saints had a great passing attack last season, and, Michael Thomas had 500 receiving yards, more than the next most in the league, and he had, 50% more receptions than the next most guy in the league. So he was taking an incredible amount of the targets. He gets 107 yards a game. So I guess you guys are right that having another solid wide receiver on the team that you can throw to for some of those is going to help him out a lot, because you can play a lot better if you're not seeing every single ball. Like, you don't necessarily want to you don't want to be the only threat and the other team knows they can just cover you and then you're screwed. So I didn't really consider that as much as I probably should have. So maybe they could be a really good Super Bowl contender, but I definitely think that the Chiefs are still a better team, as the Ravens probably are as well. All right, let's talk about Seattle. So Seattle went 11-5 last year. They just grabbed Greg Olsen, tight end. Rob, why don't you start it?
So this is an odd pickup. We don't really know what's going to be, if this is going to improve Seattle or not. Because, I mean, yes, Greg Olsen will be a big target for Russell, but this roster already has 6 other tight ends. So he's just another tight end, And then I also saw some other reports saying that this trade, this acquisition, will be problems for keeping Jadeveon Clowney around. So really, what's better, and what's better here? Do you want a dominant defensive end, or do you old tight end who I'm sure is only going to play 80 or 50% of the plays, and it's going to be not a very good pickup in my whatever. I mean, Russell Wilson's a phenomenal quarterback. He's got weapons around him. I don't know that they really needed Greg Olsen, but that's just how I see it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. They don't necessarily need Greg Olsen, but I think this is a great pickup. He started his career out with the Bears for 4 years, and then he's been playing on the Panthers for 9, and he's done a phenomenal job. We all know of Greg Olsen. We know he's a veteran reinforcer for the offenses. I think they'll do, obviously, like Rob said, I don't think he'll get 100% of the playing time, because they have a strong trio of tight ends between himself, Disley, and Hollister. If Hollister is re-signed, we'll see if he is or not later in the free agency. But I think this pickup does not only him, but Seattle justice. I think they have an advantage with Greg Olsen because he's a dominant physical tight end, and he has proven what he can do, and I think this pickup is phenomenal on their end.
So I would say I like this pickup too. Just a note about the Seahawks. I think they're kind of a weird team because I think Russell Wilson is, I think he's probably the second or third best quarterback in the league. I would put him at second. He is a monster, but they're the 12th best receiving offense in terms of yards last season. So I think picking up the 11th best receiving tight end, who also has pretty good blocking ability, is going to help them a lot. And you got to keep in mind that Greg Olsen was playing with a much worse quarterback in Cam Newton. And I think Russell Wilson is just much, much better. He's on a whole different level. And I could see this elevating him, even though this is pretty late in his career. I could see this elevating him to another level. He might look way better here than he ever did before. So I think this is a good move. The Seahawks are going to be a contender for getting pretty far in the playoffs, as they always are. I really, I think this is good. I think it's going to push Seattle above teams like the Bills and the Texans, but probably not at the level of like the Chiefs, Ravens, Saints, that tier of teams. So, I think it's a good move.
Sean, I agree with you, and I think a notable thing about this is to also kind of question his performance levels now that he is a 35-year-old receiver who has missed multiple seasons due to injuries, so that he's injury prone. But I think overall, just with his talent, what he's proven throughout the years that he's been in the NFL, this seems more like a worthwhile risk. I think like I said, the Seahawks would definitely benefit from him being on their side. And now that he has Russell Wilson, like you were stating, Sean, this could be a good matchup, these two guys. And that's my take on that.
Last tight end we're going to talk about here is the Falcons, a 7-9 team, picked up Hayden Hurst. I think this is a solid move, but it's not going to be enough to fix the Falcons by any means. They have issues outside of their third best passing game, such as their, third worst rushing attack. They're really poor in terms of rushing and good in terms of passing. So, with that said, a solid blocking tight end could help boost their run game a little bit, but I wouldn't expect big things from this team next season, even though they have a very, very good quarterback. They were 7-9 team. I think they're going to be similar to that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to let you a little bit. I think you're completely wrong. I think that was the stupidest thing you've ever said on this podcast. I think the Falcons. I think the Falcons are going to be like an 11-5 team, 100%. Matt Ryan.
Why?
Is a phenomenal quarterback. So to address their running game, they already have, right? So we're not talking about him this way. I'm going to leave my comments for later, but they just picked up Todd Gurley to shore up that run game, which he is an outstanding running back. Hayden Hurst was a former first-round pick he's a relatively good catching tight end, a good blocking tight end. Yeah, they got rid of Austin Hooper, who is arguably the best tight end in the league right now, but Hayden Hurst is a good replacement. I just think that with their receiving core, who has, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, they're adding Hayden Hurst to that. They're adding a running back in Todd Gurley. I just think that this team is going to be a phenomenal contender this year. I think it's just going to be. I think their hiccup was when Matt Ryan got hurt, and now he's back. He's healthy. And they showed at the end of the season. I think they were going on a 4-game winning streak, and they beat some of the best teams. I think they're going to continue to carry that into next season. I think they're going to be this team is just going to be great, in my opinion. I think they're going to lead the NFC in a lot of categories. They have some of the best talent at every position on that. So I'm excited to see. I mean, I don't think a 7-9 season is in their future. I'm thinking 11-5, 12-4.
And I 100% agree with everything you just said, Rob. I think the pickups that they've acquired, and even though they lost Austin Hooper, I think Hayden Hurst is a good pickup. He's a solid tight end. He performed really pretty well with Lamar Jackson at the Baltimore Ravens. I don't see this pickup being a disappointment at all. I think he's young. I mean, he's been in the NFL for only 2 seasons now, so he still has a lot of time, a lot of game to play throughout his career, and he's a stud, and he'll perform well for the Falcons with all their weapons on their offensive side. And I agree that they are definitely a playoff team, and their offense is going to shine this coming season.
All I would say is I think you guys are overestimating how much Todd Gurley is going to help them out a bit.
And it was to your point of saying that they had one of the worst.
Yeah, but Todd Gurley isn't actually that good. Like, he's pretty good, but if you look at his stats, they're really.
I think he was not on the right team for him. I honestly think coming to the Falcons, where they're going to be able to have a better quarterback, I think it'll take a lot of the pressure off of him, and it'll open up a new world.
So I don't know. I feel like there's more things they have to shore up. They took the 5th most sacks in the league last season. They have a pretty poor offensive line, and I don't know that adding a top 10 maybe running back like Todd Gurley would be enough to boost them. In addition to this Hayden Hurst move, to be a serious playoff contender. I mean, they could get to the playoffs, but I don't think if they won the Super Bowl, I would be absolutely shocked.
I mean, I definitely think that they're a contender for it. I mean, and I definitely hear you about the sack concerns and all this, but they're already beginning to shore up where they're holes essentially. So I'm assuming they're going to draft some offensive linemen in the draft. I'm sure they're going to pick up other offensive linemen that they're going to need to fill those gaps. I just think the sacks come from a poor running game where you have to rely so heavily on your quarterback that it just puts way too much pressure on the offensive line to hold people for that many seconds and do all this other stuff where, we're not talking about Derrick Henry here, but I mean, it's still a sizable increase in running ability. So I just think, I don't know. I think they're a Super Bowl contender or at least a championship game.
Maybe getting to the championship game contender. Yeah, it's not that I think this move is bad. I just think that they have a lot of things to go before they become a really, really elite team. So I'm not trying to shit on them too hard. I'm not saying they're terrible. I think this is a good move. I just don't think it's going to fix their team. I think they have other issues, such as in their O-line. So we have one last move here. So we got PJ Walker, he's coming from Temple, and he went to the XFL after being, he went on to the Broncos, I believe, and then he never really got to play. They cut him off the practice squad. So I think he's decent in for a backup. I don't mean he's decent in terms of starters, but as far as we know, he's just going to be competing for a position as a backup. So, it's a fine move, but I don't think that there should be any huge hype around this move. It's like being the best quarterback in the XFL is like being the best fat stripper or something. It's really not like much of an achievement. XFL is like D1 college level, and D1 college level is pretty terrible compared to the NFL as well. So I don't think, he's going to be a starter soon or anything, but, he should be a fine backup. I've seen him make some pretty good plays.
All right, guys, and one more notable thing for this Panthers team. I know previously in the last episode I talked about the competition between Teddy Bridgewater being added to that roster and Kyle Allen, who performed well when he stepped up for the Panthers, and I thought that they were going to be dueling it out, but now it is updated that Kyle Allen was added to the Redskins, and now he's competing for the starting role against Haskin. So we'll see how that goes. But for the Panthers and PJ Walker, hopefully they get their shit together and perform really well like we expect them to this.
I just think it's interesting that the XFL is now almost a breeding ground for NFL backups. That's essentially what it is. I mean, I'm glad these guys get to play. I mean, and it'd be really interesting to see, how the transition goes for a lot of these XFL guys. Because I'm sure we're going to see more of this where, guys are just going to be picked up willy-nilly from the XFL. I think it's good for the league in general, honestly, because you're going to be able to keep backups in playing condition. I don't know that any starters will come from there. Maybe they will. Who knows? But I just like the fact that there's this crossover between the two leagues now. And yeah, I'm excited to see kind of where this goes if the XFL is able to stick around, essentially.
Yeah. So with that, let's just wrap this up. So, you can find our links to our social media in the YouTube description, or if you're listening to this on any podcast player, you can find it in our description there as well. So, make sure to leave a like and a comment if you guys enjoyed the video. We'll be coming back with more. We got another episode planned that we should be releasing shortly after this. Just a little teaser. It'll be about whether or not college athletes should be paid. So, look forward to that, guys. That's about it.